Rain poured over Seoul like the city itself was crying. At the top floor of Hanul Tower, Taehyung stood silently in front of the glass wall overlooking the city. Below him were thousands of lights, endless traffic, and a world that believed he had everything: money, power, control. But tonight, everything collapsed. The boardroom door slammed open. CEO Taehyung, you've been removed from the company. The words hung in the air like a gunshot. For 10 years, Taehyung built Hanul Group into one of Korea's most powerful corporations. And now, the same executives who praised him yesterday had voted him out. Corporate betrayal was nothing new to him, but this time it came from someone he trusted, his own mentor. Taehyung didn't argue. He didn't shout. He simply took off his expensive watch and placed it on the table. Keep the company, he said calmly. The directors stared at him in confusion. Because I'm done with it. And just like that, the richest man in the room walked away with nothing. 3 weeks later, a small countryside town, 3 hours outside Seoul. The apartment building looked like it was built during another century. Paint peeling, rusty stair rails, and a broken elevator that hadn't worked in years. Taehyung climbed the stairs carrying a single suitcase. For the first time in his life, no bodyguards followed him, no reporters chased him, no assistants waited for orders. Just silence. He unlocked apartment 302. The room was tiny: one bed, one table, one window. That was all. Taehyung sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. Then he laughed quietly. The richest man in Korea, living in a place like this. Knock knock. Before he could finish the thought, someone started banging loudly on his door. Hey, new neighbor. Taehyung frowned. The door flew open before he even answered. A girl stormed inside carrying grocery bags. Her hair was messy. Her voice was loud. Her energy chaotic. Finally, someone moved into this cursed building. Taehyung blinked. Who are you? She placed the groceries on the table like she owned the place. I'm Kimara, apartment 301. She pointed at him suspiciously. You look unemployed. Taehyung stared at her. Excuse me? Ara crossed her arms. I can tell. You have that broke but pretending to be cool face. Taehyung had faced billionaires, politicians, and ruthless investors. But somehow, this random girl made him speechless. She continued talking without stopping. Anyway, rule number one of this building. She opened his refrigerator. It was empty. She nodded proudly. Yeah, I knew it. Then she dumped ramen and eggs inside. You're welcome. You look like the type who would starve. Taehyung watched the entire scene in disbelief. No one had ever treated him like this. Not employees, not CEOs, not politicians. But this stranger acted like he was a helpless child. Ara grabbed the door handle and turned back. Oh, one more thing. She looked at him seriously. I hate rich people. Then she smiled brightly. Luckily, you look poor. And she left. Silence returned to the tiny apartment. Taeyang slowly walked to the fridge. Inside were instant noodles, eggs, and milk. He stared at them for a long time. Then he laughed, for the first time in years. It felt genuine. Kimara, this might be interesting. What she didn't know was that the quiet man living next door was actually the billionaire CEO everyone in Korea feared. And what Taeyang didn't know was that Kim Ara was currently writing a drama script. A script that accidentally exposed the biggest corruption scandal inside his company. And when that script reached television, it would start a war. Morning sunlight crept slowly through the thin curtains of Taeyang's tiny apartment. For a moment, he forgot where he was. No marble floors, No penthouse view of Seoul. No assistants waiting outside his door. Just a creaky bed and a quiet countryside street. Taehyung rubbed his eyes and sat up. Then his stomach growled loudly. Right. He opened the refrigerator. Inside were the groceries the girl next door had thrown in last night: eggs, milk, instant ramen. Taeyong stared at them like they were museum artifacts. In his entire life, he had never cooked a single meal. His chefs had always handled everything. But now, he picked up the ramen packet. How hard can this be? 10 minutes later, smoke filled the apartment. The pot had boiled over. The noodles were stuck together like glue, and the fire alarm screamed loudly. Beep, beep, beep. Taeyang coughed and waved the smoke away. Then, bang. The door flew open. Kimara stormed inside like an angry tornado. I knew it. She grabbed the pot off the stove. What kind of person burns ramen? Taeyang looked slightly offended. I was experimenting. Ara stared at him like he had just said the dumbest sentence in history. Experimenting? With ramen? She turned off the alarm and opened the window. You really are useless. Taehyung crossed his arms. I am not useless. Ara pointed at the destroyed noodles. This is evidence. Taehyung didn't reply. Instead, he calmly took a bite. Ara looked horrified. Are you insane? Taehyung chewed slowly. It's not that bad. Ara snatched the bowl away. You're going to poison yourself. She grabbed a pan and started cooking quickly. Eggs sizzling, noodles boiling. Within minutes, the small kitchen smelled amazing. Taeyang leaned against the wall, watching her. You do this often? Ara shrugged. When you are broke, you learn survival skills. She placed the bowl on the table. Eat. Taehyung sat down. The ramen looked simple, but when he took the first bite, his eyes widened slightly. This is good. Ara smirked proudly. Of course it is. Then she sat across from him and studied his face. By the way, Taehyung looked up. Ara narrowed her eyes. You don't look like someone who should live here. Taehyung stayed calm. What does that mean? Ara leaned forward like a detective. You dress too nicely. You speak too politely. And your hands. She grabbed his wrist suddenly. Taehyung froze. These are not poor person hands. Taehyung slowly pulled his hand back. What are poor person hands supposed to look like? Ara grinned. Rough. She pointed at his fingers. Yours look like you've never worked a day in your life. For a moment, Taehyung almost laughed. If she only knew. The $1 billion deals. The sleepless nights. The wars inside boardrooms. But instead, he simply said, I used to have a different job. Ara tilted her head. What job? Taehyung answered calmly. I worked in corporate management. Ara made a face of disgust. Ugh, I hate corporate people. Taehyung raised an eyebrow. Why? Ara stood up dramatically. Because rich CEOs destroy ordinary people's lives. Her voice suddenly became emotional. My dad's company went bankrupt because of one. Taehyung's expression changed slightly. Ara continued angrily. They buy companies, crush employees, and act like kings. She grabbed her bag and headed to the door. Anyway, I have work. Before leaving, she turned back. Oh, and one more thing. Taehyung looked up. Ara smiled mischievously. You owe me breakfast tomorrow. Taehyung frowned. Why? Because I saved your life today. She walked out laughing. The door closed. Silence filled the apartment again. Taehyung slowly finished the ramen. Then he looked out the window. For years, he had been exactly the type of person Ara hated: a powerful CEO, someone who destroyed companies to win business wars. He leaned back in his chair. Kim Ara, what would you do if you knew who I really was? At that exact moment, in the apartment next door, Ara opened her laptop. On the screen was the title of the drama she was writing, The Corrupt Empire. The story was about a ruthless corporation that secretly ruined hundreds of companies. And the CEO in her script looked suspiciously similar to Taeyang. Neither of them knew it yet, but their lives were about to collide in a way that would change everything. And the next morning started with chaos. Bang, bang, bang. Wake up. Taeyang slowly opened his eyes. For a moment, he thought someone was trying to break the door. Then he heard the voice again. Hey, Raman Burner. Taeyang sighed. Kim Ara. He opened the door. Ara stood there holding two plastic bags and looking extremely annoyed. You are still sleeping? Taeyang checked the clock. 7:12 a.m. It's early. Ara pushed past him into the apartment like she owned the place. Normal people wake up early. She placed the bags on the table. Now cook. Taehyung blinked. Cook what? Ara turned slowly. Her expression was pure disbelief. You promised me breakfast. Taehyung frowned. I don't remember promising that. Ara crossed her arms. You owe me for saving your life yesterday. Taehyung sighed again. I told you I don't know how to cook. Ara stared at him. Then suddenly she grabbed his arm. Come with me. 2 minutes later, they were standing inside the building's tiny shared kitchen. Ara pointed at the stove. Today you will learn. Taeyang looked at the eggs like they were complicated machinery. Ara shook her head. You're hopeless. She cracked the eggs into a pan and handed him the spatula. Flip it. Taeyang tried. The egg broke instantly. Ara groaned loudly. How do you survive? Taeyang calmly replied, I used to have staff. Ara froze. Staff? Taeyang realized his mistake. At my office. Ara looked suspicious. What kind of office has cooking staff? Taeyang answered quickly. A big one. Ara narrowed her eyes. You're weird. She leaned closer and studied him carefully. You really don't look poor. Taeyang smirked slightly. And you really don't look quiet. Ara ignored the comment. Instead, she suddenly grabbed his hand again. Taehyung stiffened. She examined his wrist carefully. Then she gasped. Wait a second. Taehyung's heartbeat increased slightly. Ara pointed at a faint tan line on his wrist. You used to wear a watch here. Taehyung stayed silent. Ara squinted suspiciously. And not a cheap one. Taehyung slowly pulled his hand away. You're imagining things. Ara leaned back and crossed her arms. No. Her eyes sparkled like a detective solving a mystery. You're hiding something. Taehyung looked calm, but inside he was slightly impressed. She was smarter than he expected. Ara suddenly grinned. I knew it. Taehyung raised an eyebrow. Knew what? Ara pointed dramatically. You're secretly rich. The kitchen went silent. Taehyung blinked. Then Ara burst into laughter. Relax, I'm joking. She wiped tears from her eyes. As if a rich person would live in this building. Taeyang quietly smiled. Exactly. Ara grabbed her bag and headed toward the door. Oh, right. She turned back. I forgot to tell you something. Taehyung looked up. Ara held up her laptop proudly. I'm writing a drama. Taehyung nodded politely. What's it about? Ara's smile turned mischievous. A corrupt billionaire CEO who ruins people's life. Taeyang almost choked on his coffee. Ara continued excitedly. And in the end, his empire collapses, and everyone discovers what a terrible person he is. She leaned closer. I really hate rich CEOs. Taeyang stared at her quietly. Then he said calmly, that sounds interesting. Ara grinned proudly. It's going to be the best drama in Korea. She walked out of the kitchen confidently. Taeyang watched her leave. Then he quietly whispered to himself, "You might be writing about someone very familiar." Across the hallway, Ara opened her laptop again. On the screen was the title of her script, The Corrupt Empire. Below it was the name of the villain, CEO Kang Taehyung, a ruthless billionaire who destroyed small companies to build his empire. Ara smiled proudly. She had no idea that the quiet man living next door was once exactly that kind of CEO. And somewhere in Seoul, reporters had just discovered something shocking. The billionaire CEO Taehyung had disappeared. No one knew where he was, but they were about to start searching everywhere. Morning news filled the small cafe across the street from the apartment building. The TV screen flashed breaking headlines. Hanil Group in crisis. Seo Taeyang disappears after boardroom coup. Inside the cafe, customers whispered to each other, "Did you see this? They say the CEO vanished 3 weeks ago. Someone like him can't just disappear." Meanwhile, in apartment 302, Taehyung sat quietly at the small table drinking coffee. He looked completely calm, but on the TV across the room, his own face appeared on the news. The reporter spoke seriously. Authorities confirmed that Hanil Group's former CEO Taehyung has not been seen publicly since the board removed him from his position. Taehyung lowered the volume. "Still looking for me." He stared out the window. The world thought he had disappeared. But the truth was simple. He just wanted silence. For the first time in years, no investors demanded meetings. No politicians asked for favors. No reporters followed him. Just peace. But peace never lasted long. Bang! The door burst open. Kim Ara walked in without knocking again. "Good morning, useless neighbor." Taehyung sighed. "Do you always break into people's apartments?" Ara ignored the question. Instead, she dropped a stack of papers on his table. "I need your opinion." Taehyung looked confused. "Opinion about what?" Ara pulled a chair and sat down dramatically. "My drama script." Taehyung raised an eyebrow. "You want me to review it?" Ara nodded confidently. "Yeah, you look like someone who worked in corporate offices." Taehyung almost smiled. "If only you knew." Ara pushed the script toward him. "Tell me if the CEO villain feels realistic." Taehyung slowly opened the first page. The title stared back at him. The Corrupt Empire. He kept reading. The main villain. A powerful CEO who secretly destroys small companies to grow his empire. Taehyung paused. Ara watched his reaction carefully. "Well?" Taehyung closed the script slowly. "It's accurate." Ara's eyes lit up. "Really?" Taehyung nodded calmly. "Very." Ara leaned forward excitedly. "See? I knew it." She started pacing around the room. "This CEO character is the worst human being alive." Taehyung stayed quiet. Ara continued passionately. "He manipulates the stock market. He destroys small businesses. He ruins families." She stopped suddenly and looked at Taehyung. "You hate people like that too, right?" Taehyung looked at the script again. For years, he had done exactly those things. Corporate wars, hostile takeovers, destroying competitors, all in the name of success. He looked up slowly. "I think people like that believe they're doing the right thing." Ara stared at him like he had just said something ridiculous. "What?" "They're greedy monsters." Taehyung simply shrugged. Ara shook her head. "You're too nice." She grabbed the script again. "This villain needs to suffer more." Taehyung smirked slightly. "I'll keep that in mind." Ara stood up and headed toward the door. "Oh, by the way." Taehyung looked up. Ara smiled mischievously. "I'm meeting a TV producer today." Taehyung blinked. "A producer?" Ara nodded proudly. "If they like my script, this drama might actually get made." Taehyung raised an eyebrow. "That's impressive." Ara grinned. "Of course it is." Then she walked out of the apartment confidently. The door closed. Taehyung leaned back in his chair, If her drama becomes popular, half of Korea will hate the kind of man I used to be. At that exact moment, across town in Seoul, inside the massive headquarters of Haneul Group, a tense meeting was happening. Executives sat around a long table. One man slammed his hand down angrily. We must find Taehyung. Another director nodded nervously. If he returns, he could destroy everything. A third executive whispered quietly. And if the public learns what really happened inside this company? The room fell silent. Because everyone in that room knew the truth. Taehyung didn't just leave the company. He knew secrets. Secrets powerful enough to bring down the entire empire. And somewhere, in a small countryside apartment, the man they feared was quietly eating ramen with a girl who hated rich CEOs.